We're welcoming back Ameer, Benno, Tolman, Vinoo, Varghese. And the president tweeted yesterday regarding the ongoing violence in Portland. We've read a lot about it, but here's what he said. Kate Brown, governor of Oregon, isn't doing her job. She must clear out and in some cases arrest the anarchists and agitators in Portland. If she can't do it, the federal government will do it for her. We will not be leaving until there is safety. Well, federal agents were withdrawn from the city. For the first time in weeks, the protests were peaceful. So, Ameer, you could argue they were peaceful because the federal agents withdrew, or you could argue that they were peaceful because the federal agents were there if they weren't peaceful. What do you think?
I definitely think it's the latter. I mean, they came in. There's no doubt there was riots, there was anarchy, there was destruction. But most of the time in Portland, the protests were peaceful during the day. What was unpeaceful is when you hit 3 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. There's no peaceful protests going on then. At that point, it was about defacing, destruction, pillaging, and rioting. And that's what the federal troops were in there, or the federal agents rather, under Operation Legend were in there to maintain control. I think they sent their message, and we'll see if this sticks. I mean, but I don't think that the president was wrong at all for sending in federal troops to maintain order.
Yeah. Vinoo, do you think the president has the right to do that and should have done so?
Yes, and I think it's actually a smart move on his part, particularly in an election year, to be the law and order president. The federal police power comes in essence through the Commerce Clause, and they can regulate streets. So you've had prosecutions going back 30 years. One of the most, at least from the perspective of an Asian American, was the Vincent Chin federal prosecution, where two men were charged with federal civil rights violations for killing a Chinese man in Detroit in the early 80s, where they assumed he was a Japanese person, and this was the height of the Japanese auto takeover of Detroit. So, you know, you have a history of where the federal government can come in. I think they lost a court battle on that, and they're going to lose a court battle on this. So the federal government, Trump can send in federal troops. And look, when you see scenes, I mean, I live here downtown Manhattan, my office on Wall Street, just a few blocks up from here was chaos at night. Luckily, it didn't reach down to my office. I was happy about that. But, you know, it would have been important at that time, had things gotten worse, that federal troops or National Guard or somebody be sent in. Right. People, good citizens, want law and order. And if he rides that wave, that'll be the smart thing to do for him. You
know, Brett, one of the things I wonder about, though, is whether law and order is the right term, because I think Frank Luntz, the pollster, he was interviewing some people. Law and order may not work as a term as well as it did back in 68 or 72 with Nixon, but something that does work is safety and security, because everybody wants that.
Yeah, there's no question the notion of law and order has changed. It's evolved. You can look at polling, and the majority of even conservatives are for reform of the criminal justice system. And so there's an odd mix, and it's an important mix, because at some point we're going to get back to normal and we can have discussions about fixing some of the areas that need fixing in the criminal justice system. But look, the president, it's not necessarily about sending people in. Let's keep in mind that the cities like Portland and others, they all have agreements, memorandum of understanding with the federal government, which they join with local and state police in a task force, and they have arrest authority. They have the ability to arrest on violent crime because of the joint task forces, and they have the ability to arrest on crimes that are federal, and certainly crimes against property that is controlled or owned by the federal government. So this was not some remarkable and extraordinary effort by the president. It was common sense, and it was right, and it needed to be done.
Yeah, and one of the things I think Brett makes is a good point, Ameer. He talked about getting back to some of the issues that launched all this. I haven't heard George Floyd's name mentioned in a very long time, and you've got Black Lives Matter that is trying to pull people in and expand whatever their agenda is way beyond what happened there.
Yeah, and as it ties into what's going on in Portland, I think it's important to note that most likely what it was is these aren't your run-of-the-mill average mom and dads who are protesting peacefully, who would then go ahead and start creating chaos. This is Black Lives Matter. This is Antifa doing it at nighttime. Of course, you've got the fifth column of the media who's not covering this anarchy, but is only covering the peaceful protests, trying to create a narrative that Trump is sending in federal agents to essentially rile peaceful protests. But I think what it is in Portland, they're trying to provoke President Trump to send in federal authorities into cities like Portland, into Oakland, into New York, into Minneapolis. And hopefully he won't take the bait on that, because they use that to spin a narrative that, he's against everybody, against, public and peaceful protests. So while in Portland, I think he sent the right message. I hope that going forward, he's a little bit more reserved about sending in federal agents into the big cities, because as Election Day gets closer, I don't think that it's going to reach down to his benefit.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Vinoo, it seems like when I look at the prospect of the Democrats being in charge, I don't see how these things get better, especially with the anti-cop sentiment that I see in a lot of quarters, which really offends me, because I think the cops, the overwhelming majority of them are the good guys, not the bad guys.
Well, in the last month, I've published 2 op-eds. One published in New York Law Journal, law.com. The other one in the New York Daily News. And I spoke about the cops who were charged in the Rayshard Brooks case, saying they were not guilty of murder, and it was overcharging in that case. And also in the George Floyd matter with Derek Chauvin, he was overcharged.
Yes.
A manslaughter in that case was a legitimate charge. Can be, I think, provable, though I think he can still beat that. But to charge him with second-degree murder was wrong, and it was overcharging.
It's a political prosecution.
Went way beyond what he did. Absolutely. So the thing that people, from a political point of view, when you're talking about, I use the term law and order, or other guests here use the term safety, security, or you did, whatever term you use, that's going to resonate because people aren't feeling comfortable.
Right.
So if you're talking about defunding police, that's, will be good in certain liberal sections, but Trump's not going to win those places anyway. Right. So when the rest of America, when independence, when you start talking safety, security, or law and order, whatever you want to do. Look, I make my living beating, bad cops and prosecutors, right? But never can we imagine violence against them. At least I can't.
Right.
So, or defunding them. I want New York to be safe. I live in Manhattan. I live downtown.
Right.
I want these streets to be safe. And de Blasio has turned this city into a hellhole.
It's a mess. It is a mess here.
I think that we need to fix this.
Yeah, and by the way, I have a good friend who's a cop, and nobody wants to go after a bad cop more than a good cop, because the good cops don't want to have to deal with having the bad ones. And yeah, de Blasio in this town, it's really gone downhill, folks. We're going to take a break and come back with more of American Agenda after this.